The chandeliers. The head table. System. He had been humiliated publicly without clang or show. Dante had merely denoted him into smaller numbers. That night, when the house had gone to its usual half-sleep, Dante called my name. He found me sitting in the solarium with Luca asleep in a small chair lined with a blanket that smelled like the house. Luca's prosthetic leg was set beside him like a little architectural detail, polished and shining by the moonlight. Dante poured 2 glasses of water, one for his throat and one that he offered to me without comment. "You should sleep in a proper bed here," he said. "I have a bed," I replied, "at my place." "You also had a driver." He said it like an observation. He was not kind, he was precise. "People pay more for danger these days," I said, because sarcasm was a language I kept even in cages. He watched me, and in the way he watched there was a history I could not read, but could feel, like a low hum. The house seemed to breathe with him. "Why did you dance with him?" he asked suddenly. "Because he asked." The answer felt thin. I wanted to say more, that his smile had been the only honest thing around, that it had been the work of my fingers to steady him, that every other person in that room had been heavy with a purpose that did not include a child's small heart. Dante frowned with a softness that did not belong to him. He told me about Luca's mother, as if naming her might make the absence less sharp. He said her name, Isabella, like a wound and a prayer at once. The story of loss is often the story of silence, a small life taken by something unnamed in a world that offered no forgiveness to those it had harmed. Dante spoke of Isabella with a tenderness that contradicted his reputation. "She died when he was small," he said, "not by ours. We lost her in the streets before I could do anything to stop it." I listened. My hands were folded and thinking and not empty, and when he looked at me, I saw a man who had learned to divide himself between what kept his name and what broke his nights. He was not all brutality. He was a man who had made cruelty into a currency and then spent it on the one thing that still hurt him. "You should have left," I said later to Maria when we sat over a kettle that hissed like a restive animal. I had friends once who thought they could fix everything by moving fast and not asking. Maria's eyes were small and careful. She had a way of saying less than she thought, but meaning more than she said aloud. "You could have found someone worse," she said, "or you could have found no one at all. He takes what he wants." "That's the thing," I said. "I didn't think I would be wanted." My voice softened like a broken string. I thought being unseen was safe. Being wanted by Dante came with a geography of dangers. He placed a formal invitation, an arrangement, at my brow. "Stay. Help Luca learn to run again on a city that made room for small miracles." In return, he promised me protection and wages that could stitch the holes in my life. There was no violence in the offer, yet, but the promise behind it was a chain with satin on the links. Days with Luca were made of small victories. We worked on balance in the conservatory, the sunlight making gold hands in the dust. He liked to race toy cars along the sill and argue about whose little engine would win. He would ask me questions that kids ask when they trust someone. "Did you like school? Do you have a brother? Why did I hurt my leg?" I answered because the truth I held about renting rooms, about working nights, about the smallness of my life felt like kindness in his ears. He asked me once if I could teach him to dance with one leg. We tried it, clumsy as 2 people inventing a language, and he laughed in a way that felt like a pocket of sunlight opening. It was in those ordinary afternoons that something insidious moved between Dante and me. He began to linger more often in the doorway, a silhouette cut against wealth. He would read in the library and then look up to watch the two of us like a man who feared he might forget how to be human if he didn't observe closely. His presence had an effect on me that I had no right to name. Fear braided into warmth, caution into a weird flutter of safety. He would offer an arm, and I would take it, not because I wanted more, but because it steadied the room. One night, after a dinner that tasted of lemon peel and old money, he closed the distance between us in the hallway. We were both pale under the oil lamp, and the house hummed around us with 1,000 guarded things. He put a hand to my cheek, and the gesture was almost brutal in its tenderness, too big, too certain. I could have stepped back. Instead, I used the deferment of my own heart. "Do you want this?" I whispered, because I had to ask for the sake of the rules I kept. Consent was a thing I wanted to feel like a mutual contract. He hesitated, and for a flashing second I saw the fissure in him, the man who could not save a woman he loved, the man who numbered his enemies like coins. Then he leaned in and answered. "Yes," he said, "but I will not make you stay if you do not want to." Words in his mouth like that were not entirely comforting. They were precise and perilous at once. I nodded. We stepped across the line precisely, neither of us ignorant of its existence. Intimacy with Dante was not a soft thing, at least not at first. It was a map of jagged territories, possession, remorse, the odd gentleness that comes the moment after a violent idea. He asked me about my family, about my mother, and when I mentioned my savings and how close they were to my tuition fee, he watched me with a strange, dangerous interest. "You will not need to worry about that while you're here," he said. It was said kindly and with a possessive undercurrent like a tide. System. System. There were screams, not of the theatrical kind, but of raw sound that climbs the bones. I found myself pressed against Dante's chest at some point, the two of us a small, unplanned island in a storm that had no mercy for innocence. Luca's small hand curled in mine like a talisman. A figure moved toward the hallway with a silhouette I recognized too late. It was Marco, but something in him had become a question mark. Fear, guilt, a man who had been offered a coin and refused the weight of its consequences. He threw himself against a door with a sound like tearing fabric. The next seconds were a violent blip, a shadow, an impact, and then the world condensed into the slant of someone's yells. I heard Dante's voice cut through the noise, a blade wrapped in velvet. He pushed me back. He pulled Luca out of harm's way. He moved like someone who had cataloged 100 kinds of danger and learned to survive them. I learned more about him in those moments than any confession could have given. The way he moved to protect, the way his hands were more steady when they were protecting someone else than when contemplating his own pain. By dawn, the house smelled of smoke and iron and something I could not name. Men in suits with faces like weathered cliffs picked the yard apart. Some were dead. Others lay in twisted positions that made my skin want to peel off. The house had been breached from inside and out. The betrayal was not a rumor now. It was a body on the marble. I would have thought that after the storm, the calm would come. Instead, the calm was a ring of questions we fit into our mouths like pills. "You should leave," Maria said, but this time there was no scold in her voice. There was a quiet that held the weight of what it meant to survive. Dante stood by the broken window, his face gray like paper money, and Luca clung to his leg like a vine. I looked at Dante and saw not a man who could be easily redeemed by tenderness, but a man who had been cut into pieces and sewn back together with stitches that showed. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw defeat in his eyes and the strange firmness of someone who had chosen something meant to hurt.
"Why did you keep me?" I asked, later, when the adrenaline had thinned and there was a bruised quiet in the mansion like a bandage. He answered with a small movement of his thumb across the back of Luca's hand. "You bring him back," he said. "You make him laugh." That was the truth I had been haunted by. My ability to make a boy laugh had given me a place inside a dangerous family. It felt like a mercenary talent. It also felt like a purpose. I did not know then that the attack would not be the last, only the loudest. There were whispers of repayment owed in blood, of alliances shifting like the tremor of small earthquakes. I also did not know that one choice, staying to care for a child, would become the axis on which my whole life swung. There were consequences to every kindness.
System. System. "We understand," he said, and his voice was smooth and slippery. When the men dispersed, leaving the smell of cheap tobacco and the echo of shoes on marble, Dante remained by the window, his palms against the glass as if bracing the world. He turned to me then and said, in a voice that asked a favor he had no right to ask, "Do you trust me?" It should have been a simple question. Instead, it carried the weight of every choice I had made in the last 72 hours. He meant more than trust in the usual way. He meant trust as surrender. "Yes," I said. I did not say the word lightly. I had watched him keep Luca alive with a ferocity that had more tenderness than I expected. But saying yes was also a lie by omission. I trusted his protection, not always his motives. I trusted that he would fight. I could not yet say I trusted what he would become while fighting. He let my answer sit, and then, astonishingly, he laughed. It was a short sound, a thing like a blade being wiped clean. "Good," he said, "because tomorrow you will be very far from this room." I looked at him, disbelief immediate and hot. "I will not leave Luca." "You will not have to," he said, "but there are places I need you to go. I need you to be seen. I need you to burnish the things that should look ordinary. If someone is going to come seeking information, they must find you in the light. That sends a message." He was asking me to perform normalcy as a weapon. He wanted me to be a face they could not suspect of being anything other than harmless. A woman with a child, smiling at afternoon tea, a wisp of hair falling over her forehead. He wanted me to be the proof that certain pieces of his life were intact. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. The question felt like the hinge of a door. "Attend the luncheon at the club," he said. "Sit with them, laugh at their jokes, drink their wine, observe." The club was a place of yellow trophies and even older grudges. A room where alliances were formed with polite clinks of glass. I had been to gatherings before, but never as a chess piece. My stomach clenched. When he saw my expression, he softened his tone. "I will have men with you," he said. "You will not be alone." "But if it goes wrong," I said, "if they know—" "They will know something if you are not there," he interrupted. "They will know that you have been hidden. That is worse. You must be seen. You must make them believe." His words were commands wrapped in logic. I obeyed because Luca slept in the next room, and because the line between selfishness and sacrifice had narrowed into survival. The next morning, I wore the dress Dante chose for me, charcoal, modest, cut to make me look less like a threat and more like domesticity incarnate. Luca's small hand held mine as he watched me tie my hair back. "Will you be back?" he asked. His voice was small and earnest, the kind of thing that made the world tilt into tenderness. "Always," I thought. System. System. Roll. System. 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 The scar in the wall had been patched, but it remained, a map of violence that time could not touch. I lay awake that night thinking of the bird and its broken wing, thinking of stories and pacifiers and lists. I understood, with a clarity that made me dizzy, that the house had already done what it was meant to do. It had turned me into someone who could hold both tenderness and steel. When dawn creased the curtains, I rose and dressed. Luca needed breakfast. Dante had plans. The city moved along its indifferent business. But I had appointments too, appointments that would ask me to thread the needle between mercy and ruthlessness. A bell rang deep in the house, and I knew it would be the kind of sound that pulled me into the day's machinery. I took Luca's small hand and, for a brief instant, let myself be the woman who told stories about brave birds. Then I put the story away and tied the knot of my purpose like armor. The conversation, I realized, had only just begun.